POV. You walk into a classroom thinking you're here to teach, but your students drop wisdom bombs that hit harder than any textbook ever could. I became a teacher because I believed authority came with the job. I believed standing at the front of the room meant something, and that knowledge flowed downward. I was wrong. I taught history at a public high school where ambition went to die quietly. The building was old, the desks were scarred with names that never mattered again. And the students learned early that effort didn't always change outcomes. I told myself I was different, that I cared and that I saw them. But caring and listening are not the same thing. There was a student named Marcus. He was 16, tall, and always tired. He sat in the back row, not because he wanted to hide, but because no one expected him to participate. Teachers called him unmotivated. Administrators called him at risk. I called him Marcus and thought that was enough. One morning, I caught him sleeping in class with his head down and arms crossed, exhausted in a way caffeine doesn't fix. I snapped, not loudly but professionally. I told him to sit up. I told him this was disrespectful. I told him if he didn't care, he shouldn't be there. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't obedience, but the kind that waits. Marcus lifted his head slowly and looked at me, not angry or embarrassed, just tired. He said, "I care. I'm just tired of pretending this matters right now." That sentence landed wrong. It challenged the structure, the hierarchy, and the script. I told him we could talk after class. Control was restored, or so I thought. After the bell rang, he didn't rush out. He stayed seated with his hands on the desk. I asked him what he meant. He said, "I work nights. I help my mom with rent. I come here because I'm told it's the only way out. But no one explains what I'm escaping to." I didn't know how to respond. Teacher training doesn't cover that. I told him education opens doors, saying it automatically, like a reflex. He smiled, not sarcastically, but sadly, and said, "Every door you talk about costs money I don't have." Over the next weeks, I noticed patterns I'd ignored. Who slept, who skipped breakfast, and who disappeared for days and returned like nothing happened. We called it apathy. It was survival. One afternoon, we discussed civic responsibility, voting, and voices being heard. I asked why fewer young people trusted institutions. Hands went up with textbook answers about corruption, politics, and media. Marcus didn't raise his hand, but I called on him anyway. He said because every system tells us to wait. And waiting is expensive when you're already behind. The class shifted, not loud or dramatic, but focused. I felt exposed, not as a teacher, but as a person. After that, students spoke differently, more carefully and more honestly. They started saying things that didn't fit the curriculum, things about fear, about debt, and about choosing between dignity and obedience. I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't teaching them how the world works. I was teaching them how to tolerate it. That realization hurt my ego, so I resisted it. I assigned more work, enforced more rules, and reasserted structure. Marcus stopped speaking, not out of fear, but out of clarity. Near the end of the year, we had a mandatory essay on the topic of success. Most papers sounded the same: career, stability, and recognition. Marcus wrote 3 pages with no introduction and no conclusion. He wrote, "Success is when you stop apologizing for surviving the way you had to. Success is when your exhaustion isn't mistaken for laziness. Success is when someone in power listens before they evaluate." I sat with that paper longer than any other. I wanted to mark it, correct it, or improve it, but I didn't. I gave him full credit at graduation. Marcus didn't look relieved. He looked cautious, like someone stepping into deeper water. He shook my hand and thanked me, not for teaching, but for letting him finish sentences. Years later, I left teaching, not because I stopped caring, but because I finally understood my role. Authority doesn't come from standing higher. It comes from standing still long enough to hear what's being said beneath you. The most profound lesson I learned from a student wasn't academic. It was this: people don't resist learning. They resist being talked over. And the moment a classroom becomes a place where truth costs less than silence, that's when real education starts.